The sky was a canvas of deep purples and soft oranges, the final traces of the day surrendering to the coming night. Under this dusky glow, the towering incubation tower stood tall, its spindly, intricate structure cradling the last egg of Acronix. The tower, though delicate in appearance, exuded an aura of strength, as if it alone held the weight of the world's future. This was no ordinary egg. It was the last hope, the final legacy of a time long forgotten, discovered and guarded by the enigmatic Order of Dusk. Within the grand chamber of the tower, a young purple eagle, Zephyr, clad in robes of the same rich hue, stood with a posture that betrayed both youth and a wisdom beyond his years. His eyes, sharp and filled with determination, surveyed the ancient symbols and sigils that adorned the walls around him. The air hummed with latent power, the energy of countless spells woven into the very fabric of the chamber. Zephyr's presence commanded respect. He was not just any apprentice. He was a prodigy, a young eagle whose abilities had surpassed even the wildest expectations of the Order. Zephyr's journey to this point had been nothing short of extraordinary. Flashbacks of his rapid ascent through the ranks played in his mind. His mastery of complex sigils, the ease with which he integrated knowledge, and his unmatched prowess in combat. The Order had never seen anyone like him. Each test he faced was a mere stepping stone, a challenge that he overcame with a grace and ferocity that left others in awe. But with each victory, Zephyr found himself pushed further into the unknown, deeper into the mysteries that even the Order could not fully comprehend. Yet, for all his skill and accomplishments, Zephyr was plagued by dreams, vivid, haunting dreams that left him restless. In the quiet solitude of his chamber, he would toss and turn, the images of monsters and puzzles playing out behind his closed eyes. No matter how powerful he became, these dreams clung to him, an enigma that refused to be solved. When he awoke, drenched in sweat, the remnants of the dream clung to his thoughts. Ugh, another dream, he muttered, rubbing his temples as he tried to shake off the unease. The presence of the monstrous figures in his dreams troubled him deeply, but it was the image of the key, glowing and mysterious, that lingered the longest in his mind. The key. Maybe it's a clue, he mused, his thoughts racing as he paced the room. Unable to rest, Zephyr sought out the Grand Master, the leader of the Order, who was meditating in a serene garden. The garden was a place of peace, where the rustling of leaves and the gentle sway of the flowers created an atmosphere of calm. But Zephyr's heart was anything but calm. "Grand Master?" he called, his voice breaking the stillness. The Grand Master opened his eyes slowly, the concern on his face evident. "Yes? What is it?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with worry. "My dreams with the puzzle monstrosities deepen. They approach at an alarming rate. Chaos and darkness advance, from the planes and the realms, and I think she is in command. If not fully responsible, she plays a role at least," Zephyr explained, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. The Grandmaster's expression darkened. "That is troubling news indeed. What evidence supports your conclusion to the puppetry of this act of malice brewing?" he inquired, his tone serious. Zephyr hesitated, his mind racing to piece together the fragments of his dreams. "The key in my dream, it's Novara's crystal key, the key of expansion," he finally said, the words heavy with meaning. The Grandmaster's eyes narrowed as he considered Zephyr's words. "I believe it might be in our best interest to have a discussion on the boundaries of such magic," he responded, his voice measured but laced with concern. Later, in the solitude of his chamber, Zephyr focused intently on the swirling energy before him. With careful precision, He began to form an egg-shaped portal, the energies coalescing into a shimmering gateway. The light from the portal cast long shadows across the room, its surface flickering with potential. "Time to pay Novara a visit," Zephyr muttered, determination etched in every word. "If the key is involved, then so is she." Without hesitation, Zephyr stepped through the portal, the world around him blurring as he was transported to Novara's tower. But when he emerged, what greeted him was not the towering majesty he had expected. Instead, he found ruins, a desolate landscape of shattered stone and crumbling walls. The once majestic structure lay in rubble, the signs of a fierce battle evident in every corner. Zephyr's heart sank as he surveyed the destruction. "Her tower has been destroyed. No sign of Novara, or the key," he murmured, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. But before he could process the implications, a low growl echoed through the ruins. Zephyr turned to see a massive hog drake emerging from the debris, its eyes locking onto him with a predatory gleam. "Whoa! Her hog drake! It's still here!" Zephyr exclaimed. But there was no time for wonder. The beast charged at him, the ground trembling beneath its massive weight. "You chose the wrong day, beast," Zephyr declared, his voice firm as he conjured a ball of energy and hurled it at the hog drake. The blast struck the creature, sending it crashing into the rubble with a roar of pain. But the beast was not so easily defeated. It rose, shaking off the attack, and prepared to charge again. "I'm not going to waste my time on this hog," Zephyr decided, frustration creeping into his voice. The key wasn't here, and neither was Novara. There was no point in lingering. With a final glance at the destruction, he stepped back through the portal, leaving the hog drake to nurse its wounds alone. Back in his chamber, Zephyr was greeted by silence. The portal closed behind him, and he stood still, contemplating the gravity of what he had discovered. "Master, it's worse than I thought," Zephyr said, as he returned to the Grand Master, his voice filled with a deep unease. The Grand Master's eyes were filled with concern as he asked, "What is it?" "Her tower. It's in rubble. The key is gone. No sign of the Queen of Masks," Zephyr reported, his tone grim. The Grand Master frowned, the lines on his face deepening with worry. "Troubling indeed," he murmured, his mind racing with the implications. "Master, something is out of place here. We must do something," Zephyr urged, his frustration boiling over. But the Grand Master shook his head, placing a calming hand on Zephyr's shoulder. "This puzzle is beyond you. I will discuss matters with the Council of Talons," he said, his tone gentle but firm. Zephyr's frustration was palpable, his voice rising in defiance. "But I can help. After all, it was my dream," he insisted, his determination unwavering. The Grand Master sighed, his expression softening. "I understand that, Zephyr. However, that connection puts you in great danger. Do you understand?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Zephyr's expression hardened, resolve filling his heart. "Master, I can handle the danger," he declared, his voice steady. The Grand Master nodded slowly, respect for Zephyr's resolve in his eyes. "I do not doubt this. You have a duty to uphold. Your final initiation approaches. Prepare yourself for the upcoming trial. The Prince has his eyes on your abilities for the Dusk Guard. Focus on your preparation. It would be wise to let the Council deal with your dream puzzle," he advised, his voice filled with the wisdom of experience. Zephyr returned to his chamber, but the frustration still gnawed at him. He paced the room, muttering to himself, "Ugh, he doesn't understand. I can't focus on my test with this puzzle on my mind." Suddenly, a sinister voice echoed through the chamber, dripping with mockery. "They never understand, do they?" The voice taunted, sending a chill down Zephyr's spine. Zephyr whirled around, searching for the source of the voice. "Huh? Show yourself," he demanded, his voice filled with both anger and fear. "Always snubbed for your thoughts, left alone in the puzzle box," the voice continued, its tone almost playful. "Enough! Reveal your form, fiend," Zephyr commanded, his patience wearing thin. The air shimmered, and a shadowy figure began to take shape. Slowly, a sentient book, the mimic tome, materialized before him, its pages fluttering ominously as it hovered in the air. The book's form was ever shifting, a dark presence that seemed to defy reality itself. "What? How did you enter my chamber?" Zephyr demanded. "You have many blind spots, Zephyr," the mimic tome replied with a low, menacing chuckle. Zephyr's eyes narrowed, his posture tensing as he prepared for a confrontation. "Sorry, but I'm not in the mood. Leave, before I vaporize you," he warned, his voice cold. The mimic tome chuckled again, its pages fluttering with a dark energy. "Oh, so hasty. I hold the knowledge you seek," it teased, its tone filled with a sinister allure. Zephyr scoffed, unimpressed by the mimic tome's attempt to tempt him. "You think I'd fall for that?" he retorted, his grip on his weapon tightening. The air around him crackled with energy, a testament to the power he was ready to unleash at a moment's notice. The mimic tome's pages fluttered more intensely, its form becoming more distinct, more real. It hovered closer, its presence growing more oppressive, yet it retained an air of calm confidence. "Maybe," it mused, "if there are the right prompts, anyone's curiosity can be lit, even yours." Zephyr's eyes narrowed further, his patience wearing thin. "Leave, fiend. You have nothing to teach me," he declared, his voice filled with unwavering resolve. In one swift motion, he conjured an energy ball and hurled it at the mimic tome. The orb of raw power soared through the air, aimed directly at the shadowy book. But the mimic tome was quick, its form shimmering as it dodged the attack. The energy ball exploded against the chamber wall, scattering Zephyr's belongings in a chaotic mess. The walls, reinforced with ancient spells, absorbed the impact, but the force of the explosion left the chamber in disarray. "Ha ha, fool!" the mimic tome taunted, its voice a low, menacing laugh. "Would you not yearn to know where you come from, who you are, what you are capable of? The answer to the puzzle that haunts your dreams?" Zephyr hesitated, the temptation of the unknown flickering in his eyes for just a moment. The questions the mimic tome posed were ones he had asked himself countless times, questions that had plagued him in his dreams and waking hours alike. The allure of answers was strong, but he quickly pushed the temptation aside, his resolve hardening. "Quite tempting," Zephyr admitted, his voice tinged with a rare vulnerability. "But you will leave." "I will never peek." His tone was final, leaving no room for doubt. The mimic tome's form began to dissolve, its dark energy dissipating into the air as it retreated. But even as it faded, its voice lingered, echoing in the chamber. Maybe next time," it murmured, the threat implicit in its words. "Sweet dreams." And with that, the mimic tome disappeared completely, leaving the chamber in silence once more. Zephyr stood alone, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind racing with the implications of the encounter. The silence in the room was deafening, filled only with the echoes of his own thoughts. Zephyr walked to the large window that overlooked the vast expanse of the Order's territory. The night sky was a deep, velvety black, dotted with countless stars that shimmered like distant beacons. The moon hung low, casting a pale light over the landscape. But to Zephyr, the world felt darker than ever. The encounter with the mimic Tome had shaken him more than he cared to admit. It wasn't just the invasion of his chamber. It was the questions the Tome had posed, questions he couldn't easily dismiss. "Sweet dreams," Zephyr muttered to himself, the words laced with a bitter irony. Dreams were supposed to be a refuge, a place of rest. But for him, they had become a battleground, a puzzle he couldn't solve, a source of endless torment. He had always been the one with the answers, the one who could solve any problem, face any challenge. But this was different. This was something he couldn't control, couldn't predict. As he stood there, staring out into the night, his thoughts drifted back to the Grandmaster's words. Your final initiation approaches. Prepare yourself for the upcoming trial. The initiation into the Dusk Guard was an honor, a culmination of everything he had worked for. But how could he focus on that when the puzzle of his dreams gnawed at him day and night? Zephyr sighed deeply, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. He knew he needed to prepare, to be ready for whatever the trial would throw at him. But the more he tried to focus, the more his thoughts were pulled back to the puzzle, to the dreams, to the mysterious key that seemed to hold the answers to everything. He clenched his fists, frustration bubbling up inside him. Ugh, he doesn't understand, he muttered again, his voice filled with a mix of anger and despair. I can't focus on my test with this puzzle on my mind. He turned away from the window, pacing the room once more, his thoughts a tangled web of confusion and frustration. The Grandmaster's advice had always been sound, his guidance invaluable. But this time Zephyr felt as if he were being pushed aside, his concerns dismissed. The dreams were his. The puzzle was his to solve. How could he simply step back and let the council deal with it? As these thoughts churned in his mind, a new resolve began to take shape. The Grandmaster might not understand, the council might not see the urgency, but Zephyr knew that he couldn't just sit back and wait. He had to take action, had to find the answers on his own. He had to face whatever was coming head-on, just as he had faced every other challenge in his life. He stopped pacing, standing tall in the center of the room, his eyes burning with determination. I will find the answers, he vowed, his voice steady and firm. I will solve this puzzle, no matter what it takes.